So I want to thank everybody for coming. Welcome to our revolution, particularly for those of you who are new. We have agendas on the table if you didn't get one. Also a sign-in sheet. Please make sure you sign in so we can keep in touch with you and let you know about other upcoming things that we have. And I'm not going to talk long because I know you're not here to hear me. So I'm going to introduce the Baltimore County Executive, Johnny Olszewski.
I think we're small enough. Do you guys mind if I'm just a little informal?
Yeah.
Sort of like pull the seat. We started and Sheila was apologizing for the size, and I just want to again remark, and we may actually get to 17 today. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Yeah, but by the time I'm gone, we count Bobby, we're at 15 already. But just the power of people coming together for common interests. And I have to tell you that this organization, which I was grateful for your support in the campaign as an organization, I want to thank Sheila and Jacob for your leadership in chairing it. Barry, you've been amazing in terms of a lot of day-to-day work and canvassing and letter writing and all, just collectively though. It wasn't just the actual 17 people in a room, it was how you amplified that and what that support meant in terms of the texting campaigns and the door knocking and the letter writing and the social media. I am convinced, there's no doubt that without your support, we would not have won the primary election. So, it's incredible when you have the opportunities to actually have those conversations and say thank you in a way that you know that made a difference. Because and it's important to remember that because elections do have consequences, right? And so some of the things, we see that nationally, we see that at the state level, but I hope that you feel like you're also seeing that here in Baltimore County. And it sort of speaks to the way government has been run in Baltimore County that I didn't even know there was an $81 million deficit when I took office. The current budget that we're working out of, page 94, at the bottom of the page, there's a footnote in 5-point font that says, oh, by the way, all these projections for the next 5 years that shows that we're in balance is predicated upon a 10-cent property tax increase and an income tax increase. And for me, it was less so much about the fact that we had a deficit, which was a challenge, and we are addressing it through this budget process, but more just an ethos of how you govern. And the way that people came to know it, the way that I came to know it is completely at odds with what I think our people want, what I think our revolution stands for in terms of integrity and transparency in government. And frankly, giving more empowerment to our residents, to our citizens. So what that footnote sort of covered up was everything from taking our Baltimore County fund balance from a 20% to 10%, which is the minimum required by law, to maxing out our borrowing capacity here in Baltimore County. And also we have what's called an OPEB fund, other post-employment benefits, which is the fund used to pay for all of our retiree health care. And we had that almost fully funded for the next 30 years. And starting in 2015, prior administration started draining that fund to pay for everyday expenses. So that fund's almost gone, but the obligation to take care of our retirees hasn't gone away. So you sort of put all those things together, combine that with the fact that people really want new schools and to pay our teachers more and to invest in sustainability and to make government more transparent. Those things also cost resources. So we've tried to be engaging and collaborative. I know many of you were able to join some of our town halls. That's something that hasn't happened, if not ever, certainly for a long time. We engaged all of the council members. We were in all 7 districts. We gave a presentation on that deficit, but let people talk. And we had no less than 200 people at any given town hall. And what was great about that engagement was that people said, yes, we want you to fix the deficit, but we also want you to build our new schools, we want you to pave our roads, we want you to build sidewalks, we want you to invest in the things that matter to us. So it was really great that we were able to engage in those conversations and help shape where this budget ended up going that we just released and that we're hoping to finalize soon. But before we even did the budget, I guess I sort of hopped over sort of the good government stuff. As I was learning about the challenge, we also said we need to change the way that we do business in Baltimore County. One of the things I promised when I ran for county executive is that I would pursue a public financing of campaigns, so that we take big money and special interest out of our politics here locally. We were able to work with the council, and by a vote of 5-2, it was bipartisan. We actually got Democrats and Republicans to come together, and this November, or next November of 2020, there will be a ballot initiative to have voters say, we believe in it, we support it, and we will enshrine it in the county charter. So once that happens, we'll put forward the funding and the enabling legislation, but everywhere it's been put up, it's been successful. We have every expectation that will be the case. We also passed ethics reform on things like lobbying. So Baltimore County did not have a revolving door exclusion where you could work for me and be a cabinet member, and the next day you could leave county government. And as long as it wasn't a project you were directly working on, you could go lobby. And we thought that was wrong, so we put a cooling off period on administrative employees. We put all of our lobbying forms online. It was really cumbersome for people to have to go and find out what the ethics form said. You had to go to Towson. We're going to start putting them online. We also created an Office of Ethics and Accountability, which is effectively our local Inspector General. You see a lot of the good work that's coming out of the Inspector General of Baltimore City. I don't think that, I'm hopeful and fairly confident there's not a lot of fraud, but there are opportunities for efficiencies, and I'd rather know that we have someone who is independent investigating those, so that our residents have every confidence that we're doing all that we can. So we passed that as we're also formulating the budget, and we heard clearly resolve the deficit, but also make these critical investments. Now, some people said, where can you cut? And I am always a big believer in finding efficiencies and finding savings where you can, but for context, over the past 30 years, Baltimore County has grown by about 25% in population. And at the same time, general government, which is the bulk of where our spending goes, has actually been reduced by about 25% as well. So we are almost the lowest per capita employee to citizen that we've been in the county's history, because our population's been exploding, but we've been shrinking government. So there's only so much so-called fat to find, but we tasked our department heads to get to work. We did things like shutting off cell phones that we were paying for that no one was using. Literally, there were just no minutes being used. We were paying for it. We had 911. We had uniformed fire personnel taking phone calls in our 911 center, as opposed to being out in the field. And it's important to have some supervision of uniformed personnel, but it shouldn't be an entire phone bank of uniformed personnel. So there's $400,000 cost savings there. Little things like changing to double-sided printing saves $50,000 a year and hundreds of trees. So just sort of thinking outside the box, being creative, we identified $20 million of savings this year, and then also $18 million more over the next 3, because we're changing the way that our school system does that STAT program, the laptop program. We're both scaling down the ratios at kindergarten through 2nd grade, because it's both a budgetary constraint, but also there's a lot of evidence out there that suggests that screen time really inhibits our youngest learners. So we want to try to back off that. And then we also told the school system Chromebooks in almost every classroom can provide the same educational content that the more expensive laptops can. And so we're going to be, as those agreements come up, we're going to flip over and save $18 additional million. But that money wasn't enough to fill our void, let alone build the new Lansdowne and Delaney and Towson's, to pay our teachers the raises that they deserve, to settle a lawsuit with our FOP, which is costing us $14 million, to put in record funding for road resurfacing. Those things all cost money. To create a chief sustainability officer and put in, for the first time ever, real money for resiliency efforts in fighting climate change here in Baltimore County. For the first time ever, creating a head of an office of diversity and inclusion. These are all things that we've been way behind the ball on, and it's time that we step up and be part of it. For the first time ever, we have money that will speak to not just we're going to pave roads, but we have to think more holistically about how do we make our neighborhoods more walkable and more bikeable. How do we connect our neighborhoods? And so we have money for the first time ever. There's a lot of firsts because we haven't made these investments in such a long time. So I'm really excited that when you marry the reform and the ethics and the accountability with sort of these critical investments in our schools and public safety and quality of life, that we've put forward a budget that really, I think, ultimately moves us in the right direction. We both resolve a surprise deficit, but we're still moving our county forward. And we do so by making some tough choices. We're one of the few major jurisdictions that has not maximized our capacity on income taxes. We're the only, of the 4 largest jurisdictions, we're the only one that does not have any sort of fee on a cell phone use. But we're actually reworking that, so don't worry. But that money is the difference between whether or not we put in planning money for Lansdowne High School, for example, and we have planning money in 2 years from now to do 2 additional high schools. On average, they cost $125 million per school. And while I'm disappointed that the state failed us by not passing the additional money we asked for, I'm confident we're going to go back and get it next year. So we still have to do our half, even as we ask the state to do theirs. But moving forward, I want to thank all of you who engaged in the budget process and recognizing that the election was important because we're putting forward these priorities. I want to thank you for engaging in the public campaign finance and the accountability stuff. I mean, it really made a difference. I think elected officials know that the election isn't that far away again. And it's good to not just get us over the hump, and then the fact that you're still engaged and still participating is great. And I think that's really driving the agenda as much as having someone put it in. Because I think without the groundswell support from organizations like Our Revolution, from our labor organizations, from community groups saying we want government to be more transparent, we want you to make these investments, I'm not sure that they'd be happening the way they are. But it's been incredible to watch. Again, I know I wouldn't be here, or we wouldn't be so successful on our agenda to date without all of you. So more than anything, I wanted to come and say thank you, to extend the invitation to continue working with you this term and hopefully beyond if things go well. Sam O'Neill is my senior advisor. She's here today. If there's any follow-up or questions or issues that you want us to really be looking at in the years ahead locally, I know a lot of the issues oftentimes are state or national, but I think that we're showing we can take a lot of the principles and the things that this organization cares about and really put them into practice locally too, and really impact people's lives in a positive way. So the vote on the budget is next week.
23rd. When and where?
The 23rd, I think it's a Thursday.
10 a.m. I believe. 10 a.m.
Out over at the old courthouse.
So there were budget deliberations yesterday that occurred, which essentially, we hope there aren't any last minute surprises for next week, but based on the articles that you may or may not have read, the council spent some more time looking at further reductions, but we believe everything should be good to go
So
next week.
there were about $15 million of additional reductions on top of the $20 million in savings we identified. We actually partnered with the council to find those because we expect that they are looking at some offsets for some slight revenue reductions on what we propose, including changing how we approach cell phones. Instead of it being an amount per line, we're both looking at a per account approach. We're also looking at just a percentage. We actually have a percentage on landlines, and so maybe just applying it equally to cell phones and just allowing that to be more progressive, so that as you have more Cadillac plans, you end up paying more. But if you are a senior or if you're in fixed income, a percentage is a much smaller amount as opposed to a fixed fee. So we are confident that we're gonna have the votes to pass the budget, which again, not only fixes what we were left, but I think puts us on solid footing to do things like build schools and pay teachers, the things that we promised we would do. On the horizon, I would say, beyond the budget, it's rallying for the 2020 election, both for candidates, but also for issues like campaign finance. I think it's a great thing. I believe Sheila actually has agreed to sort of help us sort of lead the charge on getting the word out and making that part of the conversation leading into the election. But it's also things like housing discrimination, and getting the Home Act reintroduced and passed so that we stop discriminating based on source of income. It's looking at things like higher local and wages for employees. I mean, I said that I supported a higher minimum wage. We went down to Annapolis. Unfortunately, along with many of you, again, we were able to have that passed statewide, so that we don't have to look at it locally. I think it's actually better to have a larger geography take those issues on. So but everything we've talked about, we've been trying to act on, but the conversation is iterative. I know there are new issues that spring up, but just know that my commitment hasn't wavered. I haven't forgotten who helped get me there, and I'm just grateful for the partnership and the fact that it continues, right? That it wasn't, well, we got you elected and good luck, and it wasn't, I got elected, maybe I'll come back in 4 years and ask for you to do it again. So I really just want to say thanks for the work that you continue to do and all that you've done. It's really making a difference.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
All right, so, I was just doing a little research and I guess, confirm this. So I looked at Harford County and Carroll County's taxes, how they tax income tax, and they're higher than Baltimore County.
That's right.
And I really feel like, well, I guess my first question is, I believe that's true. The second question is, when we raise our income taxes, are we still going to be less than Carroll County and Harford County's taxes?
No, so we'll be more in line with Baltimore City and Harford County and those other jurisdictions, which are all above 3%.
Okay.
We've been at 2.83% for 30 years.
Yeah, we need to catch up.
Well, and that's the thing is like not only have we not collected the revenue from income taxes for 30 years, we're the only major metropolitan, the only jurisdiction other than Baltimore City, they're largely already built out, that doesn't have development impact fees. So part of our budget solution was we actually introduced for the first time to have developer impact fees in Baltimore County, so that when you want to build new infrastructure, you have to recognize that there's an impact on our schools, on our roads, on our water, on our sewer. And so we're working with the council to try to get something passed, but you sort of put together the fact that our income tax rates have been very low, we haven't had impact fees. That's why we've gotten to the place where we just started borrowing out of our mind and going after our reserve funds to cover costs, because the mantra forever was, we haven't raised taxes for 30 years in Baltimore County, and we can do everything. Well, it turns out, you can't do everything and not pay for it. It's just that, right, the bill comes due, it's like a credit card.
So to address that, I've been going to the Baltimore County Council meetings, and I'm sorry to take up so much time.
You're good.
But anyway, and I see that the police and the fire superintendents get up and say, we need emergency funding. And the county council's, oh yeah, how much can we give you? We'll just move it from here and give it to you, and boom, $17 million to support Trade Point. More millions of dollars because the police bought the wrong revolvers and now they want clocks. But I don't see our school superintendent getting there and asking for emergency funds. Am I naive? Is that not her job? Why isn't that happening?
So they have. It hasn't been on the magnitude of things like the guns.
Right.
But I will say on the issue of the guns, once this independent office is up and running, the fact that we have a multi-million-dollar mistake, but there's no clarity on who caused it or who's responsible. We're conducting some internal investigations and looking at it, but really, I want to be able to say to these auditors or this independent ethics and accountability organization, go find out what happened, who's responsible, so that we can make sure A, it doesn't happen again, and B, if there's money to be recouped.
Well, and then $17 million for the fire department there, the fire station there. Do they need it all this year? I mean, is Trade Point already built up to the point that they need it to be, taken out of another fund? So, but also when I went to look at where people were getting their money, the fire and the police departments, they have PACs, and, out of their, their paychecks, they pay dues. And I see that the fire and the police department PACs are contributing to our county council, but I'm not seeing like our TAPCO or our teachers associations are, and it just doesn't look right to me,
Well, full disclosure, I mean, I've gotten some support from both of those organizations, and the teachers actually do it as well.
Right.
It might be, because I think it's funny, they do it through the state. As opposed to local.
Okay, all right.
MSCA, Maryland State Education Association. But what I can tell you is that goes back to why it's important to have, I mean, actually, that's some of the money I'm proud to take from our
Oh,
labor
definitely.
organizations. Labor were some, and small individuals, small business and labor were the core of my support during the campaign. But it's so critical to have an alternative, because what's happened, the concern that people have raised is that people who have real big dollars, particularly developers and other special interests, is that, well, if that's the only person who's funding your campaign, does that change your decisions relative to really impactful things that are happening? And, I think that's why it's so critical to have an alternative in a public finance system, so that people can run successfully for county council and county executive, and have the resources to communicate their message in a way that doesn't rely on, that just provides another path to actually have that conversation.
Just to piggyback off of that, the other thing that's been kind of exciting is this executive's focused on performance management, and actually having a CAO who will look at departments and make sure that there aren't these last minute surprises that are coming down at the council level. So when you can prepare adequately, but you also have metrics to determine how your departments are performing, that's really important to have that data to make informed decisions.
Yeah, I'm Carol Brown, sir, and I was wondering, would you just give me just a thumbnail of what the campaign finance reform would include?
So it's basically predicated on a small dollar match. So most other jurisdictions, I believe, have a maximum of $200 or $250. But you have to go out effectively and get a bunch of individuals to give you smaller dollar contributions, and some of them have to be $5, $10, $15, $20. And then you basically, at a certain point, when you have enough support, you sort of are perceived to be viable as a candidate, it unlocks the matching public dollars to partner up with small dollar donations that you get.
Is there a limit? Is there a
It varies
or-
based on, so different jurisdictions do it differently. Montgomery County has one model, I think Howard is exploring another, Baltimore City. The state has one, actually Governor Hogan, the first time he ran, used public financing. He opted not to use it for his reelection.
Howard actually passed the ballot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But they're construed differently, but the basic principle is that small dollars, and if you get enough of it, it's matched by public dollars.
And what is it in Baltimore County? What would it be?
We'd have to
Limit?
create that if it's passed. If it's passed in November of next year, we would create
The details.
The details.
Okay.
That's right. Sorry.
Two questions. First is, what relationship do you have with the county council? Good, bad?
I would say it's been better than it's been in any of their memories. And that's not my words, that's theirs. I mean, we actually talk, we actually have dinner together. We try to help them and their constituents, because it really should be a partnership. It's not meant to be adversarial.
And secondly, raising taxes is a vote rule, and so do you foresee some Republican running against you?
Absolutely. It just was clear that I would be doing, well, so just for context, I lost a state senate race last election before this one by about 500 votes. Before winning this one by 17, and so, and I wasn't supposed to lose my senate race, and I wasn't supposed to win this race. So I've come to a point where, and in between all that, I became a father, and so my daughter's 3.5 now. It's like I've just gotten to the point where I think if you do the right things the right way for the right reasons, that it might make your path a little more difficult to have, some Republican come forward and say, Johnny O's a tax spender, and it's like, well, actually, I believe in investing in education, I believe in fixing problems. I don't wanna kick the can down the road because we already have aging infrastructure, we already underpay our teachers. And so I welcome the debate. I wish I didn't have an $80 million hole to start. Cause I could, if we were flat, we were, generating revenues to do new things, we'd be doing a lot of new things, but we're just trying now to be very strategic in what we're doing that's new.
Good luck.
Thank you. And just to add to Sam's point, then I'll take two more before Bobby gets the hook. In addition to sort of the offices, we're also trying to change the way that we budget, so do things like open budgeting so that you will eventually be able to see down to the contract where your dollars are going, and creating a performance management system that is public so that you can hold not just me, but any administration accountable for our progress towards our stated goals. Because I couldn't tell you today how long it takes on average to get a permit. I couldn't tell you today on average how long it takes for a pothole to be filled. And we're in 2019. So these are all sort of, I think, advancements in addition to fixing the underlying issues where we make government more responsive and about customer service. So-
Yeah, my name is Vito Skirchinski. I come from labor. I was the president of AFG Constitute 20 that represents Social Security employees nationwide for 35 years. I spent 5 straight weeks and weekends on top knocking on doors for Ben Jealous in Baltimore City. I was very disappointed in your failure to actively support Ben Jealous. The people in Maryland elected him, the Democrats in Maryland elected him as their candidate for governor, and you as a Democrat should have supported him like Ben Cardin did aggressively. Second comment, and I have a question, is it has to do with your Polish heritage. I get upset with people mangling Polish names. Your name's Olszewski, not O. Coach K's name is Krzyzewski, not K. My name is Skirchinski, not S. And I would hope that you would encourage people to use your actual name rather than a bastardization of your name. Second, now question. So I have a question on both the revenue side and on the expenditure side of taxation. Now, I'm much more in favor of taxing the wealthy than middle income and the poor. So did you consider on the tax having a graduated income tax which would affect wealthier people at a higher percentage level than lower income people? And did you consider the phone tax? It's almost a necessity for everyone to have a cell phone, so that tax I think is regressive. So did you consider instead something like a luxury tax, sales tax on luxury items, or a property tax on high value properties, say over 500,000 or more, instead of the cell phone tax?
So-
And on expenditures, just to finish.
I just want to make sure I can actually
Okay.
answer them too, so I don't want to get
Okay.
too far. Let's do the revenue side
Yeah.
first, then we do the expenditure. So on the cell phone, that's part of why so first of all, Lifeline and sort of any government, there are a bunch of educational other exemptions. So some of those folks you may be concerned about may already be exempt. Part of why we're exploring going to a percentage rate as opposed to a per line or even per account rate is because if it is at a percentage, the graduated, people who have more income are likely to have more expensive accounts. People at lower incomes are likely to have less expensive accounts. So there would be some graduation in terms of what people are paying. Relative to the income tax question, I voted for the reforms in the income taxes when I was in the legislature because it made it progressive and it did have sort of a scale. The state proactively prohibits us from doing that locally, but what I am going to explore, if we can get this package passed, is creating a local earned income tax credit, which sort of has the effect of offsetting for lower income working families. Same challenge on sales tax. and on property taxes, we can't differentiate on rates, so we basically can do a flat rate for property taxes under state law. And if we do that, that's actually, I feel like that's more regressive than, especially if we get like a percentage cell phone tax to do, that will disproportionately hurt lower income people and seniors. What was the last, luxury tax, we cannot do sales tax, that's the state explicitly keeps that right to themselves.
All right, then on the expenditure side, there's two things that interest me that I didn't hear in your plans on spending money. And that is improving public transportation in Baltimore County. Yeah, I live in Catonsville. I would have loved to take public transportation to this meeting. It would take me hours, literally. And there's the public transportation in this county is horrible. For me to get, I used to work at the Woodlawn in Social Security. It's about a 10-minute drive. It would take me an hour by bus by taking multiple different buses from where I live, which is off of Edmondson, to Security Boulevard. And that's ridiculous. So we need improvement in our public transportation, and I think revenue, and I understand that that's a joint effort with state and federal, but I think we need some concentrated effort on improving public transportation within the county. And second, certainly teachers deserve a raise, but I haven't heard you say anything about other county employees who also deserve a raise. So are they going to get a raise under your budget?
Yes, because there's money from Kerwin, so the state is actually proactively helping with teacher salaries. We're able to give them a 2% raise at the start of the fiscal year, which is July 1st. The state is not helping with other employees though, so because of the budget constraints, they are also getting a 2%, but it won't be until the end of the fiscal year, which helps with some of the budget challenges. I'm glad you raised transportation. In addition to it being sort of a state and federal partnership, and we can't do a whole lot by ourselves, and we have to do it with other local governments in the state at least. We did put, in addition to the $1 million for biking and walking within our communities, first line item ever, we also put forward planning money for Towson to explore the idea of a circulator. And if we can get a circulator working in a place like Towson, then we can say, okay, this works here, let's go to other partners and say, can we replicate it in a Catonsville, in a Pikesville, in a Perry Hall? And so we're trying to move the ball. The budget also has a dedicated deputy out of the Public Works Department to actually specifically be focused on transportation issues and really to raise the consciousness level of that importance, because it really is important. We haven't given enough attention to Baltimore County. We're trying to make those investments in the context of tight budget constraints.
Thank you for being a friend of Baltimore City, by the way.
Oh, I forgot to talk about regionalism.
Thank you. You know, it's,
Sorry, you have the,
I know that.
Yeah, that's important though. I mean,
And, you know, I used to teach at Towson University, and I used to say, crime steals a bus,
Yep.
and rats don't know county lines. And to go to places that maybe have an inordinate amount of problems, it's sharing the resources and sharing the knowledge. And you're one of the few people, I mean, besides what you're doing in the county, that I don't feel is overly hostile to where I live. And I think, you know, Baltimore City has a lot to offer. And thank you, and
thank you for mentioning that. I mean, look, if the city isn't strong, the county will struggle. That's why we are so proud to be ardent supporters of arts and cultural institutions in Baltimore City. Our budget sustains a lot of that funding, even though we're in a deficit situation. We are looking actively at how do we do more public transportation, public safety, economic development opportunities. And first we were working on a few things with then Mayor Pugh, but fortunately,
Did something happen?
fortunately, Mayor Young and I have known each other for a very long time, so we've sort of picked right up, and you know, we know it's just a line on a map. It's not just rats or buses, it's also opioids, it's also anchored institutions like Hopkins and UMBC there can be synergies. People live in the county and work in the city, or work in the city and live in the county, and we have to be there for each other. And it's one of the things I'm really proud that we've brought to bear, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.